right, well, good afternoon, and welcome to today's Economic Club of Indiana luncheon. So glad you all found your way here. Raise your hand if you went to the convention center first. I did. Melissa, my colleague, and I fortunately were early. So it's great to be here at the Indiana Roof today, a little change in scenery. And I want to go ahead and get things started. We are always known to keep things on time, and we have a very exciting speaker today. Whether this is your first time, we welcome you, or a longtime supporter, we thank you for being with us today. My name is Melina Kennedy, and in my day job, I'm the CEO of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, but also here in a voluntary position as president of the Economic Club of Indiana. So I want to welcome you here today in our 2025-2026 season, which is soon coming to a close. Before I introduce the guests at our president's table, which I'll do here in just a moment, I do want to do a thank you to our presenting sponsor, One America Financial. So let's do a round of applause. Thank you for their generous support, as well as our platinum sponsors that you can see. Well, I guess we don't have the flag up here today. I'm used to doing that. But our platinum sponsors that you can also see on your tables as well. I do want to do a special shout out and thank you to WFYI Public Media. Huge thank you. As hopefully you know, they're a very important partner and help support making these lunches happen. And so we thank them for what they do, including their support of this event. So during our 50th anniversary season, we've had really great engagement online, and what we try to promote is dialogue and understanding with great speakers. So we do actually encourage you to go ahead and use social media if you are on social media. This is the one time it's not rude for you to pull out your phone and like our page on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, whatever your choice is. So please feel free to tweet and use our handle, the Economic Club Twitter or X handle at Economic Club IN. So now that we've gotten through the social media quick shout out, I do want to introduce our president's table. We have a wonderful group here today. So when I introduce you, I'd like for each of you to stand. We're pleased to have Shamika Young. She's the Vice President, HRBP, and Corporate Security of One America Financial. Thank you for joining us. And again, thank you to One America for your financial sponsorship. I'm also pleased to welcome John Helling, the Chief Public Service Officer with the Indianapolis Public Library. Their mission is to enrich and support communities by inspiring lifelong learning. Thank you for joining us. We also have Kathy DuBois. She is the Brian Dean with the Miller College of Business at Ball State University, appropriately in red here today, and also one of our gold-bordered platinum sponsors. Thank you for being here. Next, we also have Cole Varga, the CEO with Exodus Refugee Immigration, a local nonprofit. Thank you for joining us. They were established in 1981 with a long history of helping thousands of refugees from more than 50 different countries right here in Indiana. We're also pleased to have Dr. Macy Pohl, the Executive Director with Down Syndrome Indiana, a not-for-profit that was established by parents over 30 years ago to support this cause. Thank you for joining us. We also have Greg Petrovich. He's the president and CEO of WFYI Public Media. We all know as the Central Indiana's public media organization with a mission of trusted journalism, inspiring stories, and a lifelong learning. And again, thank you for your support of Economic Club of Indiana. Last but certainly not least, and I'm just going to do a shout out because we'll have much more of a lengthy introduction after lunch, is Steve Inskeep, our wonderful featured speaker here today. Round of applause. So if we could do one more round of applause for the full table, the president's table, and our guest speaker. What we'll do from here is we will enjoy lunch. I want to remind you that there are cards at your table. If you have questions for Steve, please write those out. We will collect them and share them. And then after lunch, we'll come back up and we'll hear some remarks from Steve and engage in a Q&A that does include the opportunity for all of you to join in. So please share your questions. Thank you and enjoy your lunch. All right, everyone, please continue to enjoy your meals. I know we're still being served, but just to keep things moving, I would like to now take a moment. It's my great honor to introduce today's guest, National Public Radio journalist Steve Inskeep. Steve is a trusted journalist, best known as the host of NPR's Morning Edition and the morning news podcast Up First. With a career spanning decades, Steve has built a reputation for bringing depth, nuance, and clarity to the news, guiding millions of listeners through the most pressing events of our time. While he's interviewed presidents and authors and musicians, Inskeep is equally dedicated to amplifying the voices of everyday people, from Pennsylvania truck drivers to Kentucky coal miners to refugees and people from all over the world, which we appreciate. His reporting is not just about power, it's about the people affected by it, giving listeners a more complete and humanized understanding of the world. His investigative work has earned him numerous accolades, too many to mention, but a few include the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award and the multiple Alfred L. DuPont Columbia University Silver Batons for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism. He's also authored multiple critically acclaimed books, Instant City, Jacksonland, Imperfect Union, and most recently, Differ We Must, just to name a few. And then beyond radio, Inskeep is a frequent guest at NBC's Meet the Press, ABC's This Week, MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell Reports, CNN's Inside Politics, and PBS News Hours, to name a few. He also contributes to publications such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the Atlantic. So with all of that, I think you can understand why no introduction is really needed. But one of the most notable things as Steve comes up here, I do want to point out, if you didn't know, is that he is from Carmel, Indiana. So he's a proud graduate of Carmel High School, and with that, please welcome and introduce Steve Inskeep.
Wow, thank you. Are you sure you introduced the right person? Because that person sounds kind of interesting, whoever that was. It's great to be here. It's great to be home. It's great to be back home again in Indiana, and great to see you all here. I'm really delighted to be part of this discussion. I know this club sponsors many really valuable discussions, and there's an opportunity to share ideas and learn things and advance a civic purpose. I don't know if our discussion today will be any good at all, but I want to reassure you that you've already accomplished something, because when you invited me here, when you brought me here, you financed my trip home to see my mom. You can applaud that. It's an accomplishment. She's turning 90 just after the new year, and is still in the house that I grew up in. So I'll be sleeping tonight in the bedroom that I was sleeping in as a teenager. She's gotten rid of some of my stuff, but it's kind of the same. Anyway, I just want to tell you a little bit about my itinerary. I'm going to be in Indiana several days this time, and I feel that the places that I'm going to go reflect a lot of things that are on my mind right now, and we will talk a little more thoroughly about them and anything else that you want to. A little bit later on this afternoon, I'm going to be spending time with the folks from WFYI. Which is still on the air. Thank you very much. Ball State Public Radio is in the room, also on the air. Tomorrow I get to drive up to Fort Wayne, and I'm going to do an event at the Allen County Public Library, and this is one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to do. They asked me to come up. I said sure, because it would be an excuse to see my mom, and my brother also in Carmel, and some other people. And it was only after I accepted that I realized why they had asked me. They put out social media posts and other things. They asked everyone in the county, as an act of unity in divided times, to read the same book. And it's my book. Which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. And then Friday night, I am going to still be at home in Carmel, and I'm going to go to the Carmel Warren Central football game. Carmel-Warren Central rivalry has a place close to my heart because when I was in high school, I called the play-by-play for WHJE, the high school radio station, and I called the regional championship during my senior year, and Carmel lost 17-15 on a last-minute field goal. And my job was to call that disappointment, from my perspective, straight. Just give people the facts of what happened, not necessarily my personal opinion of who won or who lost. And you can see that that is extended into an entire career for me. That is the definition of what I try to do as a journalist. Of course I vote. Of course I have an opinion about who won or who lost, but I can still do my job as a citizen and share information with my fellow citizens. Now, perhaps you have heard there was a little vote in Congress and public media were defunded, as the word goes. And we have given a lot of thought about what that means and how it affects the job that we do and how, if at all, the public media system needs to change. October 1st was the first official day without public funding for public radio and television stations, websites, and other things across the country. And on that day, my co-host Leila Fadel opened the Up First podcast that we co-host with some words that I've written down and may possibly be able to read if I can read my own handwriting here. She said, "We will not easily be silenced. We will continue to be advocates for truth, for facts. We will ask the questions our listeners, the American public, want. Questions that the American public want answers to, even if those we're asking don't like the questions." I think that's a mission statement for public media that we can follow. There's a lot there. And I think we're figuring out how to update the business model, how to move forward, and how to continue to give facts for the whole country, or as much of it wants to pay attention to us. We want to be available in every community. Public media, that word public, has a lot of different meanings, and one of them was public funding. That has gone away, and so we're thinking about the other meanings of that. We are members of the public, acting in the public interest for our fellow members of the public, and we'll continue doing it as long as the public supports us. That's what the job is, and I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about the things that we are able to do through our journalism if we do it well. And you can tell me when you think that we're not. I don't mean to shock you, but sometimes people disagree with things that we report or feel that we missed some of the story. But I've thought a lot about the things that these radio and television stations across the country offer that are in short supply. And one of them is firsthand reporting. Going to see for yourself, whether it is in the Israel-Gaza conflict, or something happening on the west side of Indianapolis, or something happening in South Dakota, or anywhere else across the country or around the world. Your public radio or television station, to the extent that resources allow, is sending people to go see for themselves. We live in a world where we can see video almost instantly from anywhere in the world, but you need someone to go check it out to see what is outside the frame, what that video really meant, if the video was even real. And that is something that a lot of media have cut back on. There are more and more media choices, but arguably fewer and fewer people checking out stories and going to see for themselves. Here is another thing that I think public media can do, and that is strengthen communities. We live in a world where, there are other media choices. There's a historically great newspaper right here in Indianapolis. There's strong television stations. But by and large, if you go across the country, the newspaper is a lot smaller. Their staff is a lot smaller. They are more and more likely to be owned by a national chain. The editor may not even live in the community. They may live in some other city, and they're the editor of 5 different newspapers at once. And the television stations may be owned by a national chain that has a particular business model and a particular agenda. And it's almost as if in many communities, nobody is there, nobody is local, nobody really understands what's going on locally. If you had a story to tell, if you had a complaint to make, there's nobody down the street that you could go and complain to. The public radio station, the public TV station, it's in this community. It was started by people in this community. It's run by people in this community. The head of WFYI is right over here, so if you have a complaint for Greg, see him a little bit afterward. They're in the community and they are accountable to the community, and that is really valuable. I think that public media can be especially valuable in rural areas, which are getting a lot of bad news right now. Ask any soybean farmer about the trade war. Ask any rural hospital how they see their future at this moment. There's a lot of tough things going on in rural communities. One of them is that rural public radio and TV stations have been hit really hard because they depended more on the subsidies. But if we can sustain them, if they can stay, they will be part of strengthening or reviving a lot of rural communities and fostering a greater sense of community. There are all kinds of opportunities there, and my attitude toward this moment of change and turmoil really is to embrace it and to do my job as a citizen. We were very fortunate to have federal support for many, many years, and that's great, but it's not required to have a subsidy to do your job as an American, and I'm going to do the best that I can. I mentioned a couple of other things that are on my agenda, and I mentioned going to Allen County. I'll be talking about this book that I wrote called Differ We Must. It's a biography of Lincoln told through his meetings with people who disagreed with him or who differed with him in some way. And not to get into the whole thing, but I feel that is an occasion where Lincoln was modeling a skill that we can use, that we are encouraged not to use. You're not supposed to listen to the other side because they're terrible, or they're deceptive, or they're lying, or whatever else. And frankly, I mean, listen, sometimes that's actually true. But there is value in engaging with people who are different from yourself. We live in this really big, really complicated world where social media and other kinds of media bring us in contact with all kinds of people who seem incomprehensible to us. And prior generations just never met those people. They heard distantly about them, and now they're in your face all the time. Frequently, the very dumbest thing that they ever said is in your face, right? That's what social media brings to you, the dumbest thing anybody said today. By your lights, like it's specially constructed just for you to find the thing that you would find dumbest. It gets to you. And so we're all outraged at our fellow citizens, and we don't understand what's going on. Talking to people a little more, listening a little better, is really valuable. They may change your mind. Even if they don't change your mind, you may learn something that helps you figure out how to deal with them, or if they're on the other side of you politically, how to beat them. It's valuable to learn about the other side, and that's what that discussion is going to be about. I'll raise one more thing on my itinerary, and then I'm going to invite your questions, and that is the football game in Carmel. I grew up in Carmel. There have been periods since I grew up in Carmel when I go home and I no longer recognize my hometown. Anybody who's been to Carmel knows what I'm talking about. They have transformed the city. It's become much larger. There are much bigger buildings. There was a longtime mayor, Jim Brainerd, who transformed the streetscape and put in all of these roundabouts, which it's a divided country when it comes to roundabouts. I tend to like them because I hate to stop at stoplights. Many years ago, when my oldest child was younger, just old enough to sit in the front seat, we were stopped at a stoplight, and I said, "Ava, did I ever tell you that I love being stuck in traffic?" And she said, "No, do you?" And I said, "That's because I don't. I don't get stopped in traffic anymore. I keep to go through the roundabouts. Some people hate them. But my point is, that is a community which you may love or hate in this room, but it has grown tremendously over the years in a really interesting way. I'm actually trying to figure out how to write about this, how to tell this story. Carmel has been prosperous as long as I have known it, but 60 years ago, before I was born, it was a tiny town of 3,000 or 4,000 people. And it has grown phenomenally, and part of it is just luck. It happened to be a particular location where the suburbs were growing rapidly, but part of it was policy, was civic engagement, was government planning, and the private economy interacting with the public services. There's a really good high school that I was very proud to go to, a public school, and it was good then. It's become kind of extravagant now. I don't know if you guys followed a couple of years ago, some Carmel students did a little TikTok, and it was just, here's a tour of our school. Millions of people watched this thing. They couldn't believe that was not a major university with all the facilities and everything, but it's a very good school. It's a very good school. And the city officials were aware that they needed tax money to sustain this good school, but that people do not really like to pay higher taxes. And what they've needed to do is continue expanding the tax base. And that is one of the reasons they've encouraged tremendous development, urbanization, denser building, and it's become, to my eyes, as a native of the place, a more and more interesting place, with more and more things to do, and restaurants and things to see, and public art. And it's an extremely prosperous place. It also has its problems. For example, if you're a teacher, you might struggle to be able to afford to live there now. And so now there is a new mayor, and one of her focuses is, how do we make this place livable for everybody? How do we hold down or bring down housing costs? How do we make things a little bit more affordable? But it is, to me, an exciting story of very different kinds of people. It was a very conservative place. It's become a little more blue. I think it's kind of divided now. They have had political battles over the role of government, what is appropriate and what is not. There are lots of different kinds of people there. It's become more and more diverse, and yet it is, to me, an example of success. It's an example of what we collectively can do when we figure out what is possible, what is the right amount of government, what is the right amount of a public sector, what is the right amount of a private sector, and then can we also recognize what is still not working in the formula and work on it and work on it and work on it. If there's any role that I can play in that across the country, it's just by listening, by perceiving those stories and trying to tell them, which I'm going to keep doing as a citizen as long as you're with me. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I welcome your questions as soon as we bring up some chairs or something like that. Is that right? During the little intermission there.
Well, go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, I actually can. I learned, my mom gave me piano lessons once upon a time, but I'm not going to offend your sensibilities with that.
Well, if we have time, we'll get to that. But thank you for your remarks. It was wonderful. And thank you. I see lots of questions emerging, so I'm just going to start with a couple and then take questions for the audience.
Ask anything.
And I do want to just shout out, when I talked to Steve briefly a few days ago as a little prep call, he was very clear. I don't need any scripted questions. I'll answer whatever I can, the best that I can, and we sure appreciate that.
If there's a really hard question, I'm going to walk over and play the piano.
Play the piano, exactly. Well, we had a nice discussion at our table just about Gen Z, young people thinking about what they want to do. So I thought, could we just start on a personal level? Did you see, yourself where you are today, and sort of how did you get to this journey?
Wow, it's really interesting. I don't know that I had a very clear idea of my career path, but there were two jobs that probably interested me, that I thought this would be really great when I was a kid if I could do this job. And one of them was David Letterman's job. and the other was Peter Jennings, who was the ABC World News Tonight anchor. Many years later, I actually got to meet Peter Jennings. ABC was offering me a job, and he personally encouraged me to come over, and in the end, I stayed with NPR. But I did not imagine being in public media. I listened to the jazz programming on WFYI, but just didn't really understand what it was or what that station was or how it was any different from anything else. I didn't understand what it was. And that's a thing we were talking about at the table. I mean, how do you really know what the economy is going to offer you or what's going to be available if you're 18? How are you going to know what the world is going to look like in 4, 5, 6, 7 years? But I did know that I liked to express myself. There's some cards for you there. I like to express myself. I love to write. I love to learn. My parents were public school teachers. My dad was the athletic director at North Central High School, and my mom taught in the Carmel system, mostly at Carmel Junior High. And basically, I've gotten a whole career out of doing what they did on a grand scale, which is learn things and pass them on.
Excellent, thank you. So one question that I see in some of the cards I want to ask is just, you've been at NPR, you've been in public radio for many decades, so there's been a lot of changes, you know, technology, the evolving of hosts over time, fragmented media, et cetera. So a lot to talk about, but if you could pick maybe one or two big changes that you've seen over your career and sort of your thoughts on that and how it's impacted you would be really
Well, I mean, there's the explosion of the number of media choices. I mean, basically, there are, in theory, there are many more journalists than there ever were, because anybody with a YouTube channel can say, I'm a journalist and I'm covering things. And by the way, they're telling the truth. This is really cool. I mean, I am in this profession, so-called, where you can be in that profession with no credentials, qualifications, experience, or ability of any kind. And this is protected by the United States Constitution. You can be a journalist at any moment. And so there are far more options, and I think mostly that is good. When public media were established in the 1960s, there was half an hour a night of television news, and it was thought that wasn't nearly enough, to give one example. Now there's an infinite amount of information. There's an infinite number of opinions expressed. There's an infinite number of takes, and that, I think, is mostly good. But of course, there's the question of finding facts, which is still hard, and also trying to verify what's going on in a very complicated world, and also trying to find credible information amid such a mass of it.
Great, thank you. So just going through some of these questions and trying to compile them. With one that's come up a few times, Steve, is with concerns over misinformation and disinformation rising, what role do you see for media in maintaining fact-based and civil public discourse?
Yeah, I mean, I think I alluded to it. Going to see for yourself is really valuable, and I've tried to do that as a program host. I mean, most mornings I'm working from a studio, and we're calling out to people, and occasionally a guest comes in. But I was a full-time reporter before I was a host, and I try to continue to report, to see people face to face, to travel different places. I've been 6 times to Iran. I've been 4 times reporting to China. You know, I covered the war in Syria. I've driven across North Africa. I've driven along the entire length of the US-Mexico border and been to lots of different states, including Indiana, while working for NPR, to cover different stories, and I think that's valuable. There's another thing, by the way, that's really important to me. If you're in the media, it's conventional to say, like, people don't trust the media, and this is very bad for us. I would like to suggest that it is okay that you don't trust the media, because there is a lot of media that do not deserve your trust. And I think it is my job to persuade you that any given story is worthy of your trust. I should cite my sources in a way that you can understand, listening to that story or reading it or watching it, because we're in all different kinds of media. But like I should do that story in a way that you can understand where I got my information. I should present that story in such a way that you understand that I am open-minded, and that I don't insist that I know every single thing, because we're always learning more things. And I should be able to prove what I say. I should challenge other people who are on the radio to prove what they say, and I should call it out when they fail to do so.
Excellent. That definitely deserves a round of applause. That's well said. Thank you. One of the questions from the audience, so you've been in Kentucky and then Indiana here today for a few days. The question, which I find interesting, is what do you notice being different here kind of in the Midwest heartland from the environment where you are in D.C.?
Clearly people's attention is a little bit different. I mean, things happen and they're really in your face when you're in Washington, and you realize that people are sort of following along. I mean, again, that's a thing I think about differently maybe than some people do. I don't want to blame the rest of the public for not being massively obsessed with politics right now. I think you should pay attention. A lot of really important things are happening, but I also appreciate the perspective that people are looking after their communities, that they're looking after their families, that they're doing their jobs, that they're going right on. And it is actually kind of cool when Congress is at this particular moment stopped functioning at all, that everybody here is still functioning. Has anybody thought of maybe doing a shutdown at your particular place of business until you get what you want? I just raise it as a question. So the perspective is different, and I think that is mostly for the good. With that said, I'm just also mindful we have this really, really elaborate constitutional system machinery of checks and balances. I'm sure there are people who voted both different ways and maybe some third ways in this room, but I think regardless of your politics, you would agree that system is really being put through its paces right now. That system is really being tested right now, and I think that is important. And I'm not sure that everybody fully understands how the system did work or is being changed now, or what it means, and I would love to explain that a little bit better, although I do whatever I can on the radio.
Okay, great. It was very interesting to hear you talk about some of your books, and especially the most recent one regarding Lincoln's strategy for engaging people who disagreed with him. Can you share a little Cliff Notes version of some of the key tactics or learnings that we can take back to our places of business and otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that Lincoln would listen to people. I think he was a good listener. I think he understood what the other people were saying. He was good at using humor. He also was willing to engage with all kinds of people. I mean, this is a guy, and some people will know things about Lincoln. I mean, I grew up, I got lots of Lincoln propaganda when I was growing up in Indiana. Did you guys mostly? He's an anti-slavery guy. He's the guy who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, but he was not the most radical anti-slavery person that there was. And so it's really, really interesting because there were slave owners and slave interests who described him as an extreme radical, the most crazy, dangerous person ever to be in America. And there were also people who were far more radical in their anti-slavery views about what should be done, far more abolitionists than he was, who considered him slow, backward, a stick in the mud, and a racist. Mm-hmm. And what is interesting to me is that Lincoln met with everybody across that spectrum and dealt with them. He never said, like, I'm too moral to meet with you, and he never made it personal, which is really hard for us to think about. Like, even when he was meeting with literal slave owners, he would see them as people who were in an evil system, who acted in their interests within that evil system, and it was a system that he wanted to change, but he did not say, I think you yourself are an evil person. Which allowed him to deal with them as a human being and try to get some value out of it. And it is weird but interesting to realize that he kept some slave owners on the side of the Union, on the side of the United States in the Civil War, and that means those people who owned human beings played a positive role in winning the war and ending slavery. And that's one of the things that can happen in politics. It's one of the things that can happen in a republic. I mean, there's somebody sitting across the table from you here, perhaps, who you're really sure they're really wrong about something. By the way, they're also really sure you're really wrong about something. But even though that other person is wrong, they still have a vote. in a democracy, as long as we have one. And so that's something you need to reckon with. And you may be able from time to time to join in that person in a coalition. One other thing that I will mention, since you asked about his techniques, I mean, he was a storyteller. And he would avoid questions he didn't want to answer by telling a funny story. He would be reminded of a story if there was a question they didn't want to answer. I'm hoping that's the kind of question you're about to ask.
Well, it's a great
because it's going to remind me of a story.
It's a good segue, and I want you to share that story. Someone did ask that they really appreciate your style and how you kind of bring about encouragement by saying, oh, that's interesting, and some of your mechanisms and mannerisms. So can you talk a little bit how you do use humor or other mechanisms?
Oh gosh, yes, yes. I mean, I'm telling dad jokes all the time. I mean, we had a little story yesterday. I don't know if you guys heard about this. There were 3 people who won the Nobel Prize in Science. And it was something to do, I can't even remember what the achievement was, but it had to do with like immunity. They studied immunity and disease and so forth. And the Nobel Committee started calling the 3, and they only reached 1. And then there was another they had trouble reaching, and even a couple of days later, like there's a 3rd guy who's out hiking somewhere. And his office said, he's out living his best life. We can't reach him. And so we told this story, and I said, okay, so this guy did this achievement in immunology or whatever. And I said, so to sum up, he appears to be immune to the news, but he will hear about it eventually because it's infectious. Groans all across the room. Sometimes people get upset and send a note, and they're like, why are you being happy? I'm really mad. The news is awful. But I think the very reason that the news feels awful and is stressful is the reason to enjoy it, to crack a joke, to laugh at the funeral, or whatever it is that you do. And I feel like that's the way it's always been in my family. I mean, my dad's funeral was in many ways a happy occasion because all these people came together and we basically spent the whole week sitting around doing nothing but talking. And it was fun, and there was actually a lot of laughter. And I think that's, you know, that's really important. And another thing, when you talked about mannerisms or whatever, people really interest me. And what they have to say really interests me. And I'm not faking it when I'm interested in all kinds of people in a live interview on the air. Can I tell one more story?
Please
I'm going
do.
on a little bit. We interviewed a guy who was extremely difficult. And during one of the parts of the interview, he said there were lots of things that were said on NPR that were false. That, you know, he's like, I could accuse these people of lying on NPR. I think they're just wrong, but I could accuse them of lying. And I said to him in the interview, I said, if you ever hear anybody saying something that's not true on NPR, let me know, I want to hear it. And he said, I don't have time. So we got to the end of the interview, and I said, Ambassador, thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure having you on. And my co-host, Michelle Martin, turned to me and said, I just heard somebody lie on NPR. But I kind of wasn't. I mean, it's being polite. But also, I was glad that he engaged. I was glad that he took my sometimes irritating questions, and I enjoyed the exchange.
Very good, thank you. One of the questions I think no better person to advise on, how should citizens and especially students find credible sources of information?
Listen to NPR.
There.
I have a slightly more specific suggestion, and it's a thing that my 20-year-old does. She and some of her friends do as well. The Up First podcast. Yeah, I hope this isn't cutting FYI out, but. You guys are, yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, it's short, it's direct. There's a lot of people who don't listen to the radio, didn't grow up, don't necessarily have a radio around them wherever they are, but it's like the 3 top stories of the day, and she really likes it. And it makes her proud of NPR because somebody shares her a story with her that was in the New York Times or whatever, and she's like, I heard about that yesterday because I was listening to NPR. And that's really exciting to me. And another thing that is exciting to me about that podcast, there's a lot of young people listening. There's also a lot of like really busy, influential people who listen to that because it is quick and it is a politically diverse audience. All kinds of people, according to surveys, are listening to that, and it's one of the most popular podcasts in the United States. I could give a lot more advice, but I'll stop with that one.
Very well said. One audience member was curious, do you get involved in the decisions on who gets to be interviewed? How does that work?
Absolutely. It's a giant collaboration. A lot of the big interviews that I will do, I book myself. Booking meaning you call up the person and persuade them to come on and try to make the arrangements for that. I mean, we had Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, on in this big interview series that we do just last week, and that's somebody where I reached out, and made the arrangements, but I have colleagues who are working with me and so forth. We had Steve Bannon on, the president's longtime advisor. That was somebody that I reach out to personally and try to negotiate that, and I try to be helpful in that way. But I work with I work with a reasonably large, not reasonably large, I work with a large enough staff of colleagues, and it's a big collaboration. It's kind of wild in that I have this job where I am in charge of no one. I am not a manager. I have no direct reports. And yet I can tell all kinds of people what to do. And at the same time, almost anybody on the Morning Edition staff might suddenly show up at my door and tell me what to do. It's kind of cool, and the ideas come from a lot of different places and a lot of different people, and sometimes it's the intern who has a cool idea and pursues it and does the right thing to get it on the air. And at the same time, people are also pushing back. Why would you want to interview that person now? That's not the right person to talk to, or they're a moron. I mean, nobody actually says that part, but they're probably thinking it. And it's a big discussion, and it's never over, which is a really important thing that I want to get across. If you're listening to the radio and thinking that's not the whole story, I agree with you, because there's no way I could get the whole world on the air today. So I'm getting what I can get away with today, and I'm going to come back tomorrow and give you some more.
So with the consolidation of media ownership and then other trends, growing reliance on corporate support and funding, do you feel those have been shaping trends in what's reported, or any other implications?
Yeah, absolutely. And I alluded to that in my remarks. I think it's really important that you have media that are based in the community. And I think it's awesome that WFYI is here. And there is this old-fashioned, broadcast tower and broadcast license, which maybe holds the news source back in certain ways, but it also guarantees that they're stuck right here with you, which is good. Yes, all right. And I think it's not good. I'm with respect to whoever does that job. I'm sure they do the best that they can, and they're probably a good person, but I was shocked when I first realized a number of years ago that there might be a newspaper in Nashville that is edited by somebody who lives in Dayton, or that the New York Daily News was edited for a while by somebody who lived in Pennsylvania, or as our media correspondent David Folkenflik was pointing out to me just yesterday, you can go to a lot of medium-sized cities and there is a newspaper and they have a reporter. It is not good that there is not local resources and local ownership of media in a lot of places. And that consolidation that you allude to encourages media to do more of these red-blue national storylines that sometimes are very true and often are very important, but sometimes also are overblown and extremely divisive, and they just miss a lot of the subtleties and the nuances of the different parts of America. I recognize that it's happening. I will even recognize that some things are good about the constant churn and the new media that rise up, but there's a lot that disturbs me about it.
Well, I know we're getting close to the end. A couple questions that I'll close with, I'll combine, but can you share either one of your favorite or most surprising interviews?
Wow. I mean, it's even hard to settle on one because I love them so much. I mean, I've told this story a couple of times, but I'll mention it. I mean, I've done a lot of interviews with important people. I've interviewed presidents of this country and other countries. I've interviewed a lot of famous writers. I got to interview Kurt Vonnegut once, about 20 years ago now, which is kind of alarming to think about. And I read all of his stuff when I was in high school and college, and I'd read his first novel, Player Piano, which is about this futuristic, not too far in the future world where all the factories are running, but they're kind of run with hardly any people, and engineers are really valuable in society, and everybody else has nothing to do, and they're just kind of on welfare with a basic income and have no meaning in life. And I asked him in this interview, is there some way that some of those things you feel have come true in the 50 years since you wrote that novel? And he says, what do you mean, some of them? It's all come true. So I love that interview, but I was on my way to saying that I do this thing in every election year where I knock on doors. I'll go to politically interesting neighborhoods, and I will just literally go to the park or knock on people's doors along an interesting-looking street, and whoever answers the door and doesn't call the police, which occasionally happens, and talks to me, that's my story. It's a way to talk to voters. It's a way to get a reality check and see what's really on people's minds. And there was a guy way down this hillside in Gwinnett County, Georgia, east of Atlanta, and we were knocking on doors and going down, and we got to this guy, and he was smoking on his porch, and I walked up to him, and he was very suspicious and demanded to see ID, which is when I realized that I'd left my ID in the car like 3 blocks away. So I walked up the hill 3 blocks, got my ID, went back. He was still standing there, and we had a really good conversation, and at the end of that he said, nobody ever asked my damn opinion before. And I thought, that is the essence of what my job is if I do my job well. To find somebody that you would never otherwise meet and introduce them to you, and you hear a little bit of their story, and hopefully, at least a little bit, it enriches your life and your world.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time and your insights. If we can all give you a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank the audience for your questions. I want to let you know that today's presentation will be online at economicclubofindiana.com. So this is a great topic to bring your employees and others together. Also want to share with you that next month on November 3rd, we have Jane Wales, who's the co-chair of the Generosity Commission. That will be back at the Indiana Convention Center, so that's where you go next time. Hope you can buy tickets to be there, and again, have a great week. And Steve, thank you so much for your time.